Good afternoon, everybody. So we'll discuss today on site investigation and exploration. Before I discuss in this topic, I like to uh, tell you about uh, the various topics which we are going to cover uh, today in two different modules. First 50 minutes we'll talk about some basic background on this site investigation, and the next we'll discuss some aspects of the site investigation testing. So regarding today's topics, what we'll cover is, first we'll introduce on this site investigation, then some of the boring methodology, then we'll discuss the sampling techniques and various exploration techniques. Then we'll discuss some field test like SPT, CPT and SCPT. Okay. Leaning Tower of Pisa example. All of you have heard, some of you might have seen also this Leaning Tower of Pisa. What makes this tower so much interesting is the tilting, which is unintended. The reason behind this tilting is the inadequate ground capacity one side and good capacity on the other. Because of that, there is some differential settlement. Now, in last few decades, there were lot of work on this to arrest this tilting, and now researchers could stabilize this tilting. And but because of inadequate investigation, this tilting happened. Although in this particular case, it became a boon, and it is one of the most important tourist destination. Now, why do we need proper investigation? We all know that we need investigation, but now I want to emphasize on proper investigation. So, the proper investigation we need because the cost of failure is too high. We may not be able to afford most of the cases the cost of failure. It may be the human life, it may be a property, or it could be both. But it is really huge, especially in case of civil engineering infrastructures. Now, again we'll see some of the failures which happened because of inadequate investigation. We'll go back to the San Francisco Dam failure, which way back in California, which happened way back in 1928. This dam was built in 1926, and just after 2 years, that is in 28, it collapsed. And when investigation was done, it was found that it failed primarily because of the existing weak rock below the hard strata, which was overlooked. This tells us that if we do the investigation properly, we could have avoided this particular disaster, because we actually missed the weak strata below. Even if we look at the recent highway collapse in Singapore, that is in 2004, that is Nicole highway collapse, there also it was found that inadequate investigation was done and collapse happened. This particular highway collapse happened because of the inadequate design of the barrier below the highway. Okay. The supporting structure, deep excavation work failed, which was like 30-meter deep cave in that spread across 6-lane Nicole highway. Okay. It was found that most apparent cause of the collapse was that the retaining wall could not handle the stress holding up the tunnel, forcing it to give way. Now, not only worldwide, in India also you might have came across some of the recent disasters. You might have heard about a sinking building in Coimbatore which was under construction. In 2010, one building in Coimbatore was sinking which was under construction, and this picture shows that below picture what you can see here is that workers are actually trying to demolish the structures because it is sinking. The reason behind this sinking is again the inadequate investigation, where the bearing soil is unable to take the load of the structure. In Coimbatore itself, another building is started sinking in 2010 during the construction itself. Okay, so there also it was found that the soil was not adequate to take the load of the superstructure. Now, in addition to this, some of the cases where we saw the bearing capacity was not enough, or there were some missing links, or some of the layers which were missed during the investigation, there were some special situation also where we need to do some kind of investigation. For example, this liquefaction. During earthquake, some of the soils, like especially the granular soils, they liquefy or loses shear strength some specific situations, and the superstructure which are resting on those soil may collapse. So that kind of site or that kind of soil need to be investigated before we go for design of any structure in that site. Similarly, various cases of embankment dams, piping failure may happen if it designed inadequately or the investigation is done inadequately. Now, many of you might have heard about this expansive soil. Some of the part of Telangana, Andhra and Maharashtra, even Karnataka, we have this expansive soil, or we also call that black cotton soil, because lot of cotton grows in that soil. Now, the problem with this expansive soil, as you may know, is during wet season or during rain, it will expand, and during dry season, it will contract. Now, if your structure is resting on this kind of soil, what will happen is during the rain, it will heave up, and during dry season, it may settle. So, this kind of contraction and expansion may lead to some kind of cracks, which is visible in this particular picture, the right side. Even the road, you can see there are so many cracks because the base soil is expansive. Now, various places the subsidence and collapse because of the underground excavations also very much visible during the underground excavation. So, that kind of site where the overburden or the soil may not be able to take the load of the overburden, in such situation we need to investigate properly the type of soil and their characteristics before we actually go by the excavation. Now, you might have heard about sensitive clays. Here one example is the Leda clay, which is very strong when in particular situation, as the picture shows that. As you can see here, the picture when it is in a proper structure, it can take huge load, almost more than 10 kgs. The same time with little shaking, it almost became fluid because of the change in the structures. So, some clays which are very sensitive in nature need to be investigated before we design any structure on this. Even the Taj Mahal, which is one of the 7 wonders of the world, is actually built in a poor soil. Okay, and there were a lot of problems we are encountering now, and they already being rectified, but still there were a lot of issues because of the bearing capacity related issues. Some of the soils which settles a lot, for example, in case of Mexico, there are some buildings which settled more than 3.6 meter. So this kind of settlement may lose the purpose of the building, and but in this particular case the picture shows there is still the building is being used, because almost it settled more than 3.6 meter, and the first floor or the ground floor rather became a basement. So you can see this, these are some particular cases where a specific investigation is needed before you actually go by the actual structure design, whether it is the sensitive clay or expansive clay, or lot of settlement may happen, or the capacity is very low, or it may be a liquefiable ground. We need to know we need to investigate the ground before we actually go by the design. Now, why we are very particular about this investigation? So many decades we have done lot of investigation, we have studied that investigation, but still they are not given much emphasis, because always like we are focused on the structure rather than which are not visible. Even the father of soil mechanics, Carl Zeki, mentioned in 1950s itself that on account of the fact that no glory attached to the foundations, and that the sources of success or failures are hidden deep in the ground, building foundations have always been treated as stepchildren, and their acts of revenge for the lack of attention can be very embarrassing. So as you can see here, sometime due to lack of proper investigation, we may have to face a embarrassing situation, and that is evident. So we cannot ignore, and we should not ignore investigation in civil engineering. Okay. Coming to this investigation and economics, obviously a rigorous investigation requires a lot of money. At the same time, it will save some money, because a proper investigation can optimize the design. So there is a relationship which this figure shows. If you see this x-axis, the increased cost, and the y-axis, the investigation and testing program, the first line, the bottom line, which shows the cost of investigation and testing program, as it will increase as you increase the number of testing, or the rigorousness of the testing increases, your cost also increase. At the same time, just the upper line, which shows that the cost will decrease to some extent. After that, it becomes, that means even you go on increasing investing on site investigation, your cost of construction may not reduce after some limit. So there is an optimum point which the uppermost curve shows. There is an optimum point which is shows the optimum cost of the investigation. So we should always look for that investigation methodology and cost. Now other aspect with the geotechnical engineers are, we have to work with natural materials. They are highly complex and site dependent, as you all know. Now first of all, they are highly complex and site dependent, unlike the structural materials. Moreover, the experience to some extent only helps. Each project is unique, each site is unique. Okay. So your experience gained can only be used with caution. You cannot generalize the experience which you which you learned during your previous projects. So great caution is needed before you adopt any new technique or any technique for the design. Coming to the actual site investigation, hope with this you had little background on what exactly this site investigation is. So now there are three components involved in this site investigation. One is site exploration, the next is the laboratory testing, and then the in situ testing. In this particular modules will not focus on the laboratory testing, mostly will focus on the site exploration and in situ testing. Obviously, even for site investigation, the laboratory testing plays a crucial role. Now coming to the site investigation, what exactly we do in this site investigation is the purpose is to obtain information on the physical properties of soil and rock around site, to design earthworks and foundation for proposed structures. Like many times you might have seen many excavations where that earthwork also needs some investigation before you actually go by the excavation, or any foundation design for proposed structures. Many times you may have to go for some repair work for the distressed structures, to carry out test on ground or backfill materials. Many times various other applications like transmission lines, oil gas pipelines, radioactive waste disposal, you need to have a proper site investigations. So from earthworks to foundation to repair work to other applications like oil storage, everywhere you need a rigorous site investigation. Now this knowledge of ground plays a crucial role for the design and the choice of construction technique. So this knowledge which you gain during the investigation will play a crucial role. Sufficient information one must obtain to enable a safe and economic design of the structures. Now coming to the principal object which are part of this investigation are, what exactly we try to focus on is the sequence, thickness, lateral extent of the soil strata, the representative samples of the soil or rock for identification and classification purpose, and to identify groundwater conditions. These are the main focus when you actually go by site investigation. One is the strata thickness details, then the representative samples, and then the groundwater. Three aspects which we focus during the investigation. And what exactly we follow, what steps we follow during the site investigation. There are four components involved. First is just gather all the informations from various maps, details, all those data, existing available data, reports, and we call that as a DEX study, which are available, which discusses the available information. Then we go by the site reconnaissance walkover survey, which is basically a preliminary survey for the site. Then we go by the detailed ground investigation, and then the geotechnical report. These are the four main components related to site investigation: the DEX study, the preliminary site investigation or walkover survey, ground investigation, and the geotechnical report. Now what you do in reconnaissance survey? First in this we see the location and confirm the various varied surfaces. We try to locate that, assessment of structures, particularly historic. If there will be some access restriction. As you know, these days there are very much congestions during the construction, so there will be some kind of restrictions which has to be investigated. Then the geology of the excavated or exposed cut faces, any geotechnical problem, cracks, settlements which are there, new construction coming up, any unexpected hazards. These are some of aspects which we try to study in case of preliminary investigation. So regarding the geological structures of the area, what exactly our goal should be is like to get the details of topography, geomorphology, existing hills, slopes, valleys, various folds, faults, those are informations. Then we also try to find out the lithology of the area, groundwater conditions, and the seismicity of the region. Many cases, especially these days, earthquakes analysis also plays a major role for the design of the structures. So, seismicity of the region also need to be investigated. Now, we just understood the various background related to investigation, then we just saw the various aspects of the investigation, what exactly are the steps to be followed. Now, what method we adopt for this site investigation we will discuss. There are two approaches. One is basically the surface investigation, where we use some photographs, aerial surveys or hydrological surveys, drainage pattern, discharge details, water table details, etc. The other is the subsurface investigation, where you actually drill hole, make some trenches, drift, or some kind of geophysical investigation. So, there are two aspects. One is surface investigation, another is subsurface investigation. So, we will focus mostly on the drill hole first. Now, the most common investigation practices require do some kind of boring. You might have seen various drilling operation in various sites, and the first thing it will come the moment you have to decide about the investigation is how many number of boreholes you have to go or how many drill hole you should do. The next thing is what depth, what should be the depth of your borehole. Now, this number and the depth will depends on the type, size, weight of the structures, and our object is always try to get maximum information from the site with minimum number of boreholes. As you know, drilling operation is little costly, so the more number of boreholes will add up to the cost. So, you try to minimize the number of boreholes, but without compromising the information. When deep excavations are required, depth of boring should be at least 1.5 times. Suppose you have to excavate a 10 meter, then borehole should be at least 15 meter. Sometimes subsoil conditions require more number of boreholes. If there is some bedrock where there are some difficult conditions, it has to go much beyond the layer beyond where you anticipate some kind of problem. Usually, if bedrock is there, if you go beyond 3 meter of the bedrock, that is good enough. Now, the depth related to this boring is also related with the how much the significant depth is. For a foundation, as you may know, almost it is the 2B, roughly 2B, the B is the width of the foundation. So, that would be the significant depth, and your borehole should go beyond that. And usually building projects, borehole are made 4 boreholes, or like all corners will go by 1 borehole, and one at center, and many cases wherever you have a heavy column load, there also we look for some kind of one particular borehole. So, as you see, there are number will depend on what type of structures you have and what kind of loading you have. And again, spacing depends on what kind of structure it is. Like for multi-storied building, spacing can be 10 to 30 meter. For a small 1-story building, it can be 20 to 60 meter. For highway, where loading is not that significant, you may have spacing 250 to 500 meter. And then we have residential subdivision, where you can have a spacing of 250 to 500 meter. There were some investigation happened by various researchers. So, they came out with some kind of relationship. For example, Sauer and Sauer, they gave some relationship to find out the depth of boring. For light steel structures, you can use this equations, dB by S to the power 0.7 equal to A, where A is equal to 3 for when D is in meters. And for heavy steel structures, you can use the bottom equation, dB by S to the power 0.7 equal to B, where B equal to 6 for when dB is in meters. So as you see, there are some rough or empirical guidelines which tells you to what depth you should drill and what spacing you should adopt. Many times one need to go by the total cost also. Usually number of depth, number of boreholes and the depth also decided based on the total expenditure. Okay. So usually the cost varies. For on an average it will be 0.1 to 5%, 0.5%, and accordingly your investigation may be adopted. Now this was about something on the boring depth and the boring spacing. Now we will discuss something on what type of method we use during the boring. There are 4 basic methods of boring: the auger boring, the wasp boring, the percussion boring, and the rotary boring. Now we will discuss one by one. Now the auger boring, as the picture says, you have just some post hole or helical auger which has to be put on the soil, and then the sample will be taken, the soil will be extracted by rotating the auger. The soil will struck in those annular spaces in the auger. The turning action cuts the soil and fills the annular space. Once the annular space is filled, the auger can be withdrawn. Now this auger boring, as you can see, is convenient partially for partially saturated sands, silts and medium steep soils. It is mostly used for highways where depth of boring is not beyond 5 meter, 3 to 5 meter. But if you want to go little deeper, one can use portable power driven augers as well, where the diameter as well as depth can be more. Here you can see carbide tipped cutting head on the auger flight, and with drilling with continuous flight auger which is mechanically driven. So you can go to a deeper depth. But as you can see here, the soil will be highly disturbed, and just for classification purpose only you can use the soil, not for any testing. Next is wasp boring. As the name implies, here you try to wasp the soil using water and do the boring. So in this particular boring method, water with high pressure is pumped through a hollow boring rods. Okay. So there will be a small hole through which water jet will pass and attack the base of the soil, which will get dissolved. The soil is loosened and broken by the water jet and the up down action of the rod. Once that is loosened, it can be carried, the soil particles will be carried in suspension to the surface between the soil and the borehole site. Now the rods are raised and dropped for chopping action of the chisel by means of winch. So as you can see, there is a winch which is used to drop and lift the chisel. So that chisel will actually be used to, and the water jet is being used to make the boring. Now as you see here, similar to your earlier case, that is the auger boring, the soil is again very disturbed. Here especially it completely dissolved. So cannot be may not be of any use, the soil which you get through this wasp boring. But can be the soil below the bore depth, just below the bore depth, will be useful for sampling purposes. That means once you reach the strata through this wasp boring, the strata can be used for sampling. So as such, the sample collected through vast boring is unacceptable and unused, and the important advantage is the soil immediately below the hole remains relatively undisturbed. The third type of boring is basically the rotary drilling. In this case, the drill tool is attached to the lower end of a hollow drilling rod and the coring bit is fixed to the lower end of the core. Now, as the drill rod rotates, it cuts the soil through the bit and simultaneously it moves. This drilling fluid also is injected through the rod and which cools down and lubricates the bit. There is this drill fluid is mostly bentonite slurry, which also sometimes provide some support to the bore wall or as a temporary support to the bore wall. There are two forms of rotary drilling. One is open drilling, open hole drilling, and another is core drilling. When in open drilling, you don't go by sampling, you just drill hole through the drill bit. In case of core drilling, you also attach one drill core barrels or sampler which actually takes out the sample during the drilling operation simultaneously with the drilling operation. So, for sampling purposes you need to have some core drilling, that means you will collect cores simultaneously with the drilling operation. Okay. Now, the advantage with this core drilling is or the rotary drilling is they are very fast, as you can guess, that, and distance disturbance also relatively low, but at the same time there are some limitations like high percentage of gravel and cobbles are there, then it is not very suitable. Then the natural water content which is there in the soil may not be maintained. The last method in case of drilling is the percussion drilling. We already seen the auger boring, the vast boring and the rotary drilling. Now, the last one is percussion drilling. Here there is a chisel which is used for the cutting purpose, usually for stiff soil or rock. The chisel will have up and down movements through a winch, simultaneously it rotates also and cuts the soil. So, a heavy drilling bit is raised and lowered to chop the hard soil. The chopped soil particles are brought up by the circulation of water. So, ultimately here as well you need some water to take out the soil material. So, we already seen the different types of boring, auger, vast boring, rotary boring and the percussion drilling. Now, we will see the sampling, different type of sampling. As you know, there are two main types, one is disturbed, one is undisturbed. In disturbed samples, soil structures get modified or destroyed during the sampling. But it is possible with some precaution that you can maintain the natural moisture content and proportion of various mineral constituents. So, that sample will be called as representative sample, though not undisturbed, because you are able to maintain the natural water content and mineral constituents. When the original soil structure changes and also the soil from other layers get mixed up, it is called non-representative sample, especially like for example cases where vast boring, where you completely mix up the soil, your soil is of no use, that is non-representative. So, and the undisturbed, which is mostly used for laboratory test, is the samples of the original soil structures which is preserved and the material properties have not undergone any kind of alteration or modification, or to a great extent. Minor modification or disturbance is possible within some limit. We can call that as the undisturbed samples. So, as you can guess, this undisturbed sample of possible only in case of more cohesive soils rather than non-cohesive soil where it is difficult to get this undisturbed. Now, as I mentioned, there are some particular lab tests where you need specifically undisturbed samples. Okay, but for this, some representative sample can be used in some particular cases of tests, like for example grain size analysis, determination of liquid and plastic limit, specific gravity of soils, determination of organic content, classification. In this all cases we can use the representative sample. We need not to have a undisturbed sample. If you have undisturbed sample, obviously you can use for this, but even with a representative sample you can go with this test. But you need undisturbed sample for specific tests like natural water content, the density, the coefficient of permeability, consolidation parameters, and the shear strength, which is the most important in soil mechanics. So these important tests need undisturbed sample for the test in the laboratory. That means in addition to this boring or drilling investigation, the sampling becomes very important. Now coming to the sampling, we will see that there are various type of sampler. One is the split spoon sampler, which are commonly used for sampling purposes. Now there are some disturbance is evident even with this split spoon sampler, so that has to be understood before we go for the sampling. Now when we call something on disturbed and undisturbed, there should be some basis where which will be the demarcation for a undisturbed sample. So through split sampler, when you get the sample, your percentage disturbance can be calculated with this formula, where the d naught is basically the outside diameter of the sampler and di is the inside diameter of the sampler, and then if you get the percentage after getting the sample, if it is within the 10% or even up to sometimes 15-20%, we can call it undisturbed. But if it is beyond that, obviously it is not undisturbed. There are some other indexes also which can be used to know whether the sample is disturbed or undisturbed, which we like recovery ratio. If the recovery ratio is 1, it is good recovery. If it is less than 1, is compressed. If it is more than 1, is swelled. So many times during the sampling, the soil get compressed or get swelled. So this recovery ratio, which is actually governs this disturbance. So it is the ratio of recovery length of the sample to the penetration of the sampler. So with this, we just discussed the various type of boring methods, the basic background on the site investigation, and then some of the sampling techniques. We'll have 5 minutes break, and then we'll continue various type of field test which is commonly used during your investigation. Now we'll discuss the various field test related to site investigation which commonly used. Some which are mentioned here is standard penetration test, dynamic cone penetration test, static cone penetration test, seismic cone penetration test, pressure meter test, field vane shear test, plate load test, and geophysical test. These are some tests which we'll discuss in this particular modules. Okay. So today's module will be able to discuss maybe the standard penetration test, the dynamic cone penetration test, static cone penetration test, and probably include the seismic cone penetration test as well. The next two modules will discuss the other related tests. Now coming to the standard penetration test, the most widely used test which is carried out during the site investigation. Almost all site investigation, whether a small residential complex or maybe a very tall structures, everywhere we go by this particular SPT, almost a century old test, which is most widely used worldwide. Okay. So what exactly we do in this particular test is we use a borehole which is extended to predetermined depth and drill tools are removed. Once you reach to a particular depth of the soil, we remove the drill rod and attach the bit with the sampler. Once we lower the sampler to the desired depth, the sampler is driven by hammer with some blows. The hammer weight usually will be 65 kg and the drop of the hammer is 750 millimeter. This, the height and the weight in a combination gives a specific energy to the sampler or to the, and which when given get penetrated a particular value. Okay. So that the number of blows required to penetrate every 150 millimeter is recorded while driving the sampler, and blows required to penetrate 300 millimeter is added, leaving the first 150 millimeter as sitting drive. So you calculate the number of blows each 150 millimeter drive, and then you leave the first 150 millimeter and then add the next 150 and 150, that is 300 millimeter, and the total number of the blows is basically the SPTN. This has a tremendous importance in geotechnical engineering, especially in site investigation. This SPTN, which is coming out with this 300 millimeters of penetration of the sampler. So how many tests you do in a particular borehole, or how many SPT tests you carry out, that depends on the total depth, because you have a total depth of borehole 30 meters, you can have even 1.5 meters and you can have 20 times the test, or even you can go by 0.75 meters if your depth of boring is just 10 meters. Okay. So it varies. The number also depends on the type of strata or their variability. If they are varying a lot, every 1.5 meters or 1 meter the strata is changing, then you need to do a SPT test whenever there is a change in the profile. If boulders are present, of course, the penetration will be very slow or may not get any penetration. So 450 millimeter would be difficult to penetrate. In such cases, the first 300 millimeter itself can be considered. For refusal, in case sometimes if even up more than 50 blows there is no penetration, or even after 100 blows there is no penetration, or okay, so blows are required for 300 millimeter penetration, then we can call it a refusal. That means there is no sampling is being done. Okay. So either it is 50 blows for any 150 millimeter penetration, or more than 100 blows for 300 millimeter penetration. So if it is the blows are beyond 50 or 100 for 150 or 300 millimeter penetration respectively, you can call it a refusal. That means the strata is refusing to give sample. Sometimes even 10 successive blows which are not having much progress, you can call it a refusal. Now the number which is coming from this test, that is the standard penetration test, is a very crude number, although it is very important and very crucial. It has to be done cautiously and with some kind of correction. So it's a very useful guideline for the exploration, but the result has to be corrected for the various aspects like overburden or maybe the dilation correction. Because the soil is non-homogeneous and stress dependent, wide variation in N value is expected. For soil deposits that contain large boulders and gravel, the SPT number may be totally erratic, which may not be used, and there is quite some kind of correction for energy as well as for other related parameters like overburden and dilation. So we correct the hammer energy correction using the ratio actual hammer energy to the sampler to the input energy, because when you are falling a 65 kg mass from a 750 millimeter height, the amount of expected energy to be transferred may not be always follow. So you need to correct the energy, because of there will be some kind of friction between the rod and the mass, and because of that you need to go for some kind of correction. So theoretical energy input is W dot H, where W is the weight of the hammer and H is the height of the drop, and usually this input energy varies from 30 to 90%, and usual practice is to express N value to an average energy of 60%. Like usually we consider 60% of the hammer energy as in practice. There are some other correction like overburden and dilatancy. We go by the overburden correction. As you see, the soils are stress dependent, and you use the N dash is equal to Cn dot Cn into N, where Cn is the correction factor for overburden, which is equal to 0.77 log 10 2000 divided by P dash, or P dash the effective overburden pressure in kilonewton per meter square. For dilatancy correction, if N dash exceeds 15 in saturated fine sand and silts, we may have to go, rather we have to go for dilatancy correction. So final correction, that is N double dash, will become 15 plus 0.5 bracket N dash minus 15, which is shown here. If N dash 15, that represents the dense sand, because when you do the SPT test on dense sand, there is chances of dilation in the sand, which is why you need to correct for this dilatancy. So as you see, different N value has to be corrected in case of sands which are having beyond 15 N dash. Now this SPT N values can be used for using various correlations, like for example SPT number can be correlated with UCS or other related consistency index. For example, you have SPT less than 2, we can consider a UCS equal to less than 25, or if the SPT number is more than 30, you can consider UCS beyond 400 kilonewton per meter square, that is the kilopascal. That means directly the SPT number, that is the number of blows required to penetrate the 300 millimeter penetration, is representing the type of strata you are encountering. So higher the number means stiffer the strata. Now there are some other correlations by various researchers which can be used to get the phi dash, that is the angle of internal friction. Like for example, this Peck, Hansen and Thornburn can be used to correlate with N60 and phi dash. So this equation which is shown here can be used, phi dash equal to 27.1 plus 0.3 N60 minus 0.00054 into N60 whatever you got in square. Okay. So then we have the Smartman correlation, which is N60 sigma dash sigma naught dash and phi dash, which is also can be correlated with phi dash. So if this particular correlations like Smartman and Peck, Hansen and Thornburn can be used to find out uh, the angle of internal friction. The n value also can be correlated with overburden pressure with phi dash. So corresponding to different overburden pressure and n value, you can have a different friction component, as you can see here as per the Smartman plots is given. You can use this particular curves to find out the phi values. The n value also can be used to find out the modulus parameters. As you can see here, the ES is related with the N60 with a coefficient alpha, where PA is the atmospheric pressure, and alpha varies from 5 to 15, 5 for sands with fines, 10 for clean normally consolidated sand, and 15 for clean over consolidated sand. So as you see here, if you get the N60 value, you can directly calculate the stiffness or the modulus parameters of the ground. Now we'll discuss the cone penetrometer testing or cone penetration testing. What we saw in the standard penetration test is that was very crude, where you have too many differences in strata or different layers are there, different strata or strata is changing frequently. You need the changing the or lifting the drill rod and changing to the sampler is always difficult and cumbersome. So why not go by some automatic method where all the data recorded directly. So there is a method called cone penetration testing or cone penetrometer testing. What this method is here a cone is mechanically penetrated in the ground continuously and the data is recorded. So the cone penetrometer testing, as you see, it's basically a small cone, 1.4 inch dia with a cone angle of 55 to 60 degree. This CPT testing is very effective in site characterization, especially sites with discrete stratigraphy. What I mentioned here, like where the strata is highly heterogeneous and you need to have frequent SPT testing to be done. Now if you go by SPT testing in such kind of strata, it is really time taking or it's really difficult and cumbersome. So CPT testing would be much better in such situations. Cone penetrometer testing is a valuable method of assessing surface stratigraphy associated with soft material, discontinuous lenses, organic materials, potentially liquefiable materials, and various cases like landslides where a weak strata has to be identified. Now a typical picture of cone penetration test is shown here. It is just for a representation purpose only. As you can see here, these cones are usually mounted on some kind of vehicles, and once this particular cone is driven on in the soil, the tip resistance, which is recorded just at the tip, there will be a load cell which will be recording the tip resistance, and there will be a friction sleeve which will be recording the friction between the soil and the cone or the surface of the rod. So these two parameters, that is the tip resistance and the sleeve friction, is actually the governing parameters which will actually give you the details of the strata. Now this is a typical design of a cone where various components are marked. You can see here we will have a small cone, we will have some filter, then we will have a pressure sensor which will record the tip resistance, then we will have a inclinometer to measure the inclination. It has to follow a proper alignment. Then we will have a friction sleeve, which is the important parameter friction sleeve which will calculate the friction between the strata and the rod, and there are various pictures as related to this CPT testing. You can see various type of vehicles are used for CPT testing. You will have a control room inside which will record data continuously. Now, as I was discussing, two important parameters which we are particular during the cone penetration test is, one is the tip resistance, another is the friction. The tip resistance is measured by the load cell, as I showed you that just above the cone you have a load cell which will record the tip resistance. The tip resistance is theoretically related to the undrained shear strength of a saturated cohesive material, while the sleeve friction is theoretically related to the friction of the horizon being penetrated, and the local friction is measured by tension load cells embedded in the sleeve for a distance of 4 inches behind the tip. They measure the average skin friction as the probe is advanced through the soil. So, once you get the skin friction and the tip resistance through the load cells, there will be load cells which will directly record these values and will be recorded. So, once you get that, the ratio will tell you whether it is sand or clay. The ratio of skin friction divided by the tip resistance is basically the parameter which is governing. It is used to classify the soil. If the high ratio indicate clay material, high ratio, that means low friction and high cohesion, while lower ratios are typical sandy material. So, typical skin friction to tip friction ratios are 1% to 10%. Sands are generally identified by exhibiting a ratio of less than 1. So, typical skin friction for sands will be little less than 1%, and for clay it will be little higher. As you see, the ratio of skin friction, the skin friction definitely will be lower in case of clay. The friction component is low, but the friction component will be high in case of sand. Now, a typical cone penetrometer test result from the CPT data is shown here. As you can see, different soil profile here. As you can see here, you have various type of strata. One is you have miscellaneous fill, we have loose sand, we have soft clay, we have dense silts. So, the corresponding QC, that is the tip resistance, and the friction coefficient is shown here with two different plots. From that you can find out the shear strength, shear force, that is the QC minus rho GH divided by NC. So, that equation can be used calculating tau F from the cone. Another typical characteristics of the data recorded from a CPT, as you can see here, different corresponding to different depth, you have QC values. Similarly, the friction component also corresponding to different depth which are given here. Now, the vertical effective stress with the cone point resistance also can be find out for a corresponding different relative density for 40%, 50%, 60% and 90% relative density. We can use these curves which are available with various from various researchers. Okay, here the data is this particular plot is by Baldi et al. And Robertson and Campanella in 83. So, from this this graph you can directly find out corresponding to different relative density what will be the vertical effective stress corresponding to different cone point resistance. Now, this particular CPT is a mechanized way of doing the investigation, where you directly insert or penetrate a cone to the ground continuously and tip resistance and the slip friction through some kind of instrumentation. Now, if you add some additional instrumentations like a pore pressure, it becomes a more versatile. So we can call that CPTU, like CPT with pore pressure option, where you have included a piezometer. So we also call that as a piezo cone. So CPT can have additional option of measurements and can be more versatile as you add some additional features. So piezo cone can measure in situ pore pressure in either dynamic situation or static, like even you can keep it static and then measure the pore pressure, or you can during the penetration itself you can find out the dynamic pore pressure. So differential pore pressure ratio can be used for the classification purpose. So various classification purposes can be used. When the cone penetrates dense material like sand, the sand dilates and pore pressure drops. Like when you are dense sand, it tries to dilate, so pore pressure will drop. In clay material, on the other hand, the pore pressure will may rise with the penetration. So the transient pore pressure also can be recorded from this piezo cone or CPTU, whatever you call it, the cone penetration test with piezometer option. So in case of transient case, you need to wait for 5 to 10 minutes to settle the pore pressure, or sometimes you may also have to wait 10 to 30 minutes depending on the soil, how much time it takes to dissipate the pore water pressure. Sometimes, as I was mentioning, pore pressure measurement with water with temperature sensor also can be used. So this will become much versatile. This has the CPT with temperature sensor can be used for various landslide application or groundwater interface finding out. Okay. So these are used to find out the purged water zones. So as you saw, there are CPT which can be used with various other features like temperature sensors or water sensors, water measurement sensors, and becomes more versatile. But there should be some kind of caution while using CPT data. As you know, electronically it measures the data. It doesn't differentiate sometime between what is soil, what is sand. Most of the cases it will be able to capture, but many times, even like for example dry clay or desiccated clay also, it will represent as sand. Okay. So that depends on, because of the slip friction, because once it records the slip friction, it will tell you as it is a sand. So you have to interpret the data carefully. Now the other aspect is the needed, like for example in landslide applications, many times there will be a thin layer of weak zones which may be overlooked using CPT, because CPT what exactly it calculates is the average value of the penetration for 4-inch penetration. Now a particular layer, if it has a weak zone, it may not get recorded and the average value may be higher than the expected one. So tip resistance reported as undrained shear strength is actually an average value taken over a zone within few centimeter of cone tip. If the tip penetrates low strength horizons such as a landslide slip surface, the tip resistance reported on the CPT log may be much higher than actually exists on the discrete plane of slippage. So the next thing, as we are the CPT we discussed so far, the SPT, where we crudely got the information of the strata using some hammer and fall. Then CPT, where the cone is actually penetrated mechanically with and the data is recorded electronically through some sensors. And then in that sensors, if you add on like pore pressure sensors, then it will become CPTU. Even the temperature sensors can be added to, which will make the CPT much more versatile. Many a times we also need to get the details of seismicity of the region. We call that SCPT. So we want to know the shear wave velocity of the profile, the strata. In that case, you need to have a additional sensor which will record the shear wave profile during the seismic cone penetration. So this particular index is helpful for liquefaction risk study, earthquake generated ground surface movement, foundations for vibrating equipment, behavior of offshore structures due to wave loading. Now this SCPT, as I already mentioned, that seismic CPT is equipment which is add on to traditional CPT. It's basically a same CPT with the additional seismic or shear wave sensors, which will generate the shear wave velocity profile of the ground during its penetration. So this SCPT probe consists of a seismic adapter threaded to a standard CPT probe. The CPT probe records tip resistance, slip friction, pore pressure and tilt angle, and the seismic adapter is used to measure the shear wave velocities. The amount of data that is measured is too great for cordless transmission, so the CPT probe is run with a data cable through the rods. So usually a data cable is used with a SCPT data. Now as I mentioned, for simple CPT apparatus, you will have this first two graphs, which is the red and the green, where tip resistance will record and the slip friction will be recorded, QT and the FS, which is the slip friction. In case of CPTU, you are having additional pore pressure measurement sensor, so you are getting additional value of U. So that is CPTU. Now in SCPT, that is the seismic cone penetration test, you are also adding the shear wave velocity with that. So same CPT now it becomes SCPT because you are adding a seismic sensors. So all these four parameters or four graphs with corresponding depth you will get directly as the cone penetrates, and latter can be used for your analysis. There are other methods which is called dynamic cone penetrometer test, DCPT. So far what we saw SPT, that is the standard penetration test, which gives a number, a crude number for corresponding penetration with the blows. Then we have numbers which are corrected with the different strata or overburden correction or maybe dilation correction. Then the next phase is the CPT, where we saw the cone is penetrated with the mechanically operated machine, and then we use sensors to get the values of slip friction and the tip resistance. The third case we saw the CPTU, where we added the pore pressure measurement. Then next we saw the SCPT, where we also had a seismic cone penetration. The next is the dynamic cone penetration test. Here, as you can see here, the compaction of subsurface soil can be essential in many cases, like in case of highway, or maybe where the cyclic loading are common. So in case of roadways, as you see, there will be cyclic loading and proper compaction is to be studied before you lay the road. So in such situation, that is very handy and helpful, which will give you quick information of the strata compaction. So if the soil beneath the roadway is not compacted sufficiently, then over time the cyclic loads of traffic will compact the soil further, leading to surface failure such as large cracks, potholes and displaced pavements. Now the assessing compaction of non-cohesive soils, like for example fine sands, is really a difficult task. It is not possible to get a undisturbed sample for non-cohesive soils. Okay. So in situ tests are advisable in case of sending to a lab will be really difficult in case of sandy soil. So dynamic cone penetration test in such situation will be very helpful to give you the value which is desired for the design. So specifically the soil density can be measured accurately in such situation. It shares some characteristics of both SPT and CPT. So it is basically in between the SPT and CPT. SPT you are sequentially you are driving a sampler at different depth, not continuously. In CPT you are driving continuously the cone with automatic recording, but in DCPT it is also continuous penetration with hammering. So it is beating in between SPT and CPT, which enables to provide a useful soil characteristics and can deliver a complementary data set and is less expensive and troublesome. Now in this DCPT also you have cone which are similar to CPT, because SPT readings are taken at defined depth. The output is how many blows to travel a specific distance. The test is limited in scope. As I already discussed, SPT has a limited scope because it is done at different depths and number of blows required for a particular depth of penetration of the sampler. But in case of DCPT, it is more continuous information and you get a deeper depth. You can penetrate it in a deeper depth and get more details of the continuous soil profile. So it is much more versatile compared to SPT in that sense, because it is giving a continuous information. But at the same time, it is for mostly where you have continuous loading, so cyclic loading, or the surface is like highways or roadways where the loads are cyclic in nature. It is very useful. Now this DCPT also can be correlated with the SPTN. Like for example, here some correlations are given. The dynamic cone penetration test number can be equated with SPT with the coefficient of 1.5 for up to 3 meter. If it is of 3 to 6 meter, you can have the coefficient 1.75, and 2 if it is beyond 6 meter. So that way it can be correlated with the SPTN as well. Okay. So now as you see, we have the basic site investigation with different type of testing we tried to focus on. We started with the SPT, then we discuss CPT, CPTU, that is the cone penetration test with pore pressure measurement, then SCPT with the seismic cone penetration, then we also discussed the DCPT. These were the some of the tests which were very common in case of site investigation. So we saw in today's class the different type of investigation, what are the why we need to do the investigation, what is the importance, and what exactly happens if we don't have a proper investigation, and what would be the, like how costly it can be if there is no proper investigation, we all discussed. Then we discuss different type of sampling, then different type of boring methods, then different type of soil testing, field testing methods like SPT, CPT, CPTU, SCPT and DCPT. So with this I just conclude today's lecture, and will just to summarize, to deal with highly complex and site dependent material like soil, one need to plan investigation meticulously. A systematic site investigation method not only reduce the risk and uncertainty, but also optimize the design, thereby possible reduction in time and cost. So now you understood the importance of the site investigation and the important methods which are to be done for this investigation. The next two module will discuss some additional tests and the geophysical test. So thank you. you.